All right, we are live. Good morning, or I guess afternoon, or evening, or night, depending where you are. I know our four panelists were on 3 different continents, so that's pretty exciting. But we are here to talk about Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. If you weren't aware, we did a read along on the Fireside Discord as well as my channel the last 4 months. We read Dragonbone Chair in January, we read Stone of Farewell in February, and then spread out the big chunker that is To Green Angel Tower over March and April. So it's beginning of May, and it's time to just chat about this book series a little bit. So I'm joined with 3 guests again. Kathy has been with us from the start. Nico jumped in on the last book, and Carlos is joining us for the first time on this 3rd book. So we're just going to go around. We're going to start spoiler free so that anybody that sees this either live or in the after the fact, if they're interested in the series, we're just going to give kind of our general thoughts. And I think if each of us can just give, since we haven't talked about To Green Angel Tower, maybe just briefly on that book, and then just series as a whole, spoiler-free thoughts first, what you thought. And I'll go last, and we'll just go around the horn. So Kathy, why don't you start us off and tell us about your spoiler-free thoughts about To Green Angel Tower, as well as Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn.
Okay. So my editions are separate. I've had 2 books. So basically I'm going to talk about one and then the other. Siege is basically, it's really moved the story along, because now we're all at the Stone of Farewell and we get to see all the cast actually finally reunited and planning what to do in relation to the king. I'm trying to avoid spoilers for these books, but I'm going to assume that whoever is watching this has already read at least books 1 and 2, right? I think that's a fair assumption. My thoughts are that this one in particular, I really loved Siege. I really enjoyed the battle in particular that refers to the siege. I thought that was so well described. I loved the additional lore and history of the world that we learned about. I did not like some of the characters all that much. I know Nico's laughing, but anyway, yeah, basically, I thought it was just a really good installment. I think this is actually my favorite of the 4 books. Surprisingly, because I know that Storm is the final book where we actually get to see the conclusion. And I had some issues with this one, but not because of the book itself. And it's got nothing to do with the writing. It is a personal bias of mine relating to a particular character who completely destroyed my enjoyment of this book, unfortunately, or most of it anyway. But I really loved the way it was concluded. I really liked the final confrontation in the Green Angel Tower in particular. And I found myself very satisfied at the end. I thought this was a really good series, but I will admit, I don't think it's going to be one of my top 10 favorites, though it will probably be one that I will reread. I'm also keen to read more of Tad Williams, but overall, I thought this was fantastic, classic, epic, high fantasy, one of the best of its time, but not my favorite. Yeah. So that's my spoiler-free thoughts.
Okay, awesome, Kathy. Well, Carlos, we'll head to you next. But first of all, welcome to Red Fury Books. First time you've been on the channel. I know we've chatted a lot offline, but it's good to interact with you in live time here. But what are your thoughts about spoiler-free Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and the last book?
Well, thanks for having me on. Finally, good to talk to you in person. My thoughts on Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn are that I think the Dragonbone Chair is quite possibly one of my favorite fantasy books. Stone of Farewell might be one of my least favorite. And I think I agree with Kathy that Siege is really, really good. And Storm, for me, dragged quite considerably. but I like the ending. So overall, I think it's a good sort of book end to that trilogy of 4 books. Yes, I see in the chat, Chadia saying Stone is better than Chair. Yes, it is. Oh no, sorry, Stone is not better than Chair. No, I'm not agreeing with you. The cool thing to me about the whole series is that it actually feels like a setup to a more interesting story for me personally. And I would be more excited and more intrigued to see the sequel books and where they go. I am appreciative of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn for its influence on the genre. I have this little sort of informal mini project that I'm doing that I want to read some influential fantasy works that are popular on, or that influence the stuff that's popular on BookTube. And I can see that Tad was a huge influence in certain aspects. And I quite like that his writing style feels like a warm cup of hot chocolate or something, you know? And he has a charm and a kind of a love for storytelling, but he does meander quite a bit.
Yes.
Overall, I think that's where I land.
Okay, well, Nico, welcome back. What are your overall spoiler-free thoughts on the series and the final book?
So I am definitely still the highest on this of the group. This is a top 5 series for me.
Nice.
Granted, my number one for many, many years was The Wheel of Time, if that tells you why the meandering doesn't bother me at all. So some of it definitely comes down to taste. This just, the thing is too, I only read this a few years ago, and I had not read it before. I had heard of it, and I'm also just like, my goal for, 15 plus years is I want to read all the really big series, and I'm slowly making my way through. So I love this, and I definitely, this is one that I know is hit or miss, and there are some things that at the time were probably like really new and fresh, and that now like you've seen because it's influential. But I really enjoyed the books. I do think I probably would actually rate Chair over Stone, just because something about that one really, like, I was absorbed immediately, and so I really loved it, and I really liked book 2 as well, but I was absorbed immediately. But yeah, this chunk version, when I originally read it, like, okay, sorry, I put fake background on so you can't really see, but I had the terrible like trade paperback version that would fall apart as you would try to read it, the reprint. But I didn't even end up taking a break between, because I'm like, I got to keep going, and so I'm a big fan. I think it did a lot, and I will tee up as well. The sequel series is, I think, objectively better. It's hard for me to pick a favorite out of the two because I love this one so much. But there's if you like this, you're going to like that. But there are some things that just he's improved his craft. It's been a long time, and so yeah, definitely would love to see what you guys think of those. But I'm a big fan. I love so much about the series. I'm echoing a little bit. I don't know if that's me. I'm sorry. Let me try. Make sure my audio settings are right. But yeah, okay. I'm all going through headphones, so I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah. So big fan, and yeah, excited to talk more about it.
Cool. Well, I mean, I can echo kind of a lot of the thoughts all three of you had with the series. For me, first of all, I read the 2 chunky halves of To Green Angel Tower almost back to back. I read one at the end of March. I put a short book in between and then went straight into Storm in the beginning of April. So I really think of them as one book. And I think Tad did as well, because for me, the worst part of the final book was the ending of Siege was a dog. I mean, just horrible ending to that first half of the story. And then it continued for like 4 chapters into Storm. And for me, that was easily the worst stretch of the entire To Green Angel Tower. And it happened to be the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half. But I really, overall, so one thing you said, Kathy, that I agree 100% is overall, I really enjoyed the series, but it's not going to be a favorite. But the other thing that I did is, as soon as I finished, I went and added the 6 books of The Last King of Ostenard and the 2 novellas to my TBR spreadsheet, like immediately before I even wrote my review, because I said, I want more. I want to read more. So kind of like what you said, Carlos, about there's so much here, you want to see what happens next. And for me, the greatest elements, the 2 greatest elements of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn in general, for me, one is just the writing is incredible. I loved his writing from the very start. And the second thing that I loved is, I think his world building is easily one of the best. That's what intrigued me most. And that's one reason why I liked To Green Angel Tower actually the most out of all 3, is because we got a lot of history and lore as we got further into the book. And for me, that was my most enjoyable aspect of the entire series, was his world building and all this history and lore, and you're learning what happened before and all the things with the Scythian and everything. I just loved all of that. So for me, the final book was my favorite. The Stone of Farewell, yeah, it's maybe a bottom 5 fantasy book I've ever read. But he kind of rebounds from that, because Nico, I think you were kind when you said he likes to meander. I think he sometimes just likes to stop, at least in this. But it was early, so I think it's a I think it's, for a debut, it's tremendous, and it's very easy to see how he influenced George R.R. Martin and so many others. But yeah, as a world builder, I mean, maybe top 3 I've ever read. I mean, I just want to see a whole lot more. But yeah, he goes on a long while. I mean, that last book is like my 2 hardcovers. It's like 1,600 pages. It's huge. So yeah, maybe
somebody just looked it up. It is
concerning.
apparently actually longer than Wind and Truth, word count wise.
I looked it up. It is technically one of the longest novels ever written. Yeah. Yeah. I think it might be close, or if not more, than War and Peace, which is nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting what you said about the world building, because it took me until the 3rd book to really get into the world. For me, and I understand that this is a criticism from a modern perspective, because there's a huge saturated market now of fantasy. But even reading it as a modern reader, there is a lot of fantasy that is stand-in ancient European cultures. And to me, reading it, Erkinland is England, Hernister and all the language in it is Irish. And Naban and those places, it's all Greece, Rome, that Mediterranean circle. And it feels a little tired if you've read several of those kinds of books. But I understand that contextually, when he wrote it, fantasy was still, I guess,
it was very new.
Yeah, modern
new.
fantasy was still sort of finding its feet a little bit. So I understand that criticism is contextual. But into Green Angel Tower, I think he adds a lot of rich subtext to that, which makes it feel like, to me, it's almost a bit of window dressing and commentary on our own world, a little bit of like how we build these cultures that we think have been around for so long, just to bury on top of cultures that used to exist, which I thought was the most interesting part of the 3rd book. And I hear going forward that it leans into that, and we get more of like the Scythian and the Norns, which that was the world building that I was really into, and the hidden cities and stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
That
So
was
much-
what was
so
most
much.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it was very much like Europe, pretty much, many of the cultures, but the Scythi were not. They were so alien and
Yeah.
so well described that I was fascinated by them and just wanted to see more of
Yeah.
them and how they got from the garden to here, or sorry, to Ostenard. Why were the Dwarrows
Yeah.
like almost their slaves, and the Niskis? I mean, I'm just so
Yeah.
yes, I know you
Oh
know
my-
Nico, but
There
I
is
want to know all these. That's what I'm most
So much.
curious about, and why I want to read the next series. For that alone is just to see if I get some answers. And let's be honest, compared to many modern day writers, Ted Williams is really gifted.
He could
His
write.
writing is
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah.
You don't see that kind of writing today. And
Yeah.
if he does meander every now and again, I can live with that. It was more some of the characters that I had some trouble with. I think if I had connected more to characters other than Binabik, who I absolutely adore, if I connected more with some of the others, I think this could have been a favorite series, because I am a very character-driven reader. If I fall in love with a character, I will love the entire series, even if it has some other issues. But yes, it's the Scythi I want to see more of. Definitely.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm such a world building focused reader. That is like my number one thing I love in fantasy. And so I think that's naturally why I love this series. And Wheel of Time is really big for that. And that was kind of my baseline for expansive world building. And so I dug in. And yeah, you have a lot of the alt Europe kind of thing, which I agree has been kind of done to death. So I absolutely get that criticism, Carlos. But he adds a lot to it with the lore as well. I do think from a character perspective, I compare this to like Realm of the Elderlings because, especially book one, if you don't like Simon, you're not going to have a good time. And just like if you don't like Fitz in, Realm of the Elderlings, you're probably not going to have a good time for those books. And so I feel like that definitely is a lot of it. Where it lands there. But yeah, the writing, the world building, and I did like Simon, even though he's frustrating. And I know that's not the specific character you're talking about, Kathy, but
No, I'm talking about Miriam, for anyone wondering. But Simon grew on me, surprisingly enough, a character that I wasn't all that attached to, who even irritated me in the first two books. I think it was in the third that I really started to like him. I thought, okay, I've seen real significant growth in this character, and I like how he's presented. And Heidi, yes, Joshua is a fantastic character. I really did love his growth throughout the book, but he wasn't the main focus. The main focus was really Simon. He is the character we have followed for most of the series, I think. Though Joshua, yeah, he reluctant heroes. I do like them. I don't know why, but I do. Yeah.
So some of my favorite characters of all time are characters like Yoda, more recently Krupp from Malazan. So my favorite character in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is Binabik.
Yep.
Yes, mine too. Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
the
we love
old,
Binabik.
I like the old wise jokesters. So yeah, Binabik for me. And Joshua as well, I found really compelling. Joshua was probably the one that got me through Stone of Farewell, if I'm being totally honest. Even though he frustrated me a little bit, but yeah, no spoilers yet. But
hey, let's jump into spoilers. I'll put up a
Okay,
little
yeah,
banner
let's
here
do it.
for a little bit, but yeah, let's start. I think talking about characters is a good way to kind of segue into the spoilers. We love Binabik, so that's an easy discussion. So Kathy, let's just jump right into Miriam L. Because I agree.
I'm curious. I'm curious.
It's really surprising just how strong a visceral reaction I had to her running away again at the end of Siege. When
Mm.
she ran away, I'm not kidding, I slammed the book shut and couldn't believe it. I thought, this is a character who I have really disliked throughout much of the book. And then she seemed to kind of become someone perhaps I could like again when she got to the stone. But when she ran away that second time, I was infuriated and I thought, I don't like this character. I cannot believe she is putting everyone to the trouble of trying to get her back. So I found every time she was on the page in the last book, Storm, I'm talking about, I couldn't bear to read about her. I would be attributing the most negative connotations to any of her feelings, to any of her thoughts. And I absolutely hated my time with her. And I actually thought Simon could do better than Miriam Mel because, he didn't deserve her. So unfortunately, because I had such a strong reaction to her, and this is a personal bias of mine, she is the kind of person that if I met in real life, I wouldn't want anything to do with her. She's so self-indulgent and entitled and spoiled and selfish that, I just couldn't stand her. Her reason for going, perhaps that is on the author, obviously, rather than on the character itself. But it just didn't make sense to me why she would do something like that, like running away. And I can really rant about this, so I think I better stop here. But I cannot abide Miriam Mel, and at the end of the book, I wanted her dead. Oh, wow. Yeah, but she is a fictional character, so I can do that. Anyway, I'm going to stop. Yeah, I better stop. Oh, God. I hope
The
others
joke all. Oh, go ahead.
may have really? Or is it just me who disliked her so much?
I was just gonna make the joke, as I've done before. It's like the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, where the whole point is he's going to rescue his daughter, and then in the sequel, she's just like, "No, I'm not listening to you," and then it gets taken again, and it's like, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah.
So I can definitely get it.
I quite liked her. I understand what you're saying, but I think there's a huge part of obviously this kind of traditional farm boy fantasy, as I like to call it, is it just follows a lot of sort of naive, petulant children quite often. And they are very much naive, petulant children. And you can go either way of finding them kind of endearing and you sort of laugh at them or they just drive you up the wall.
Simon was more endearing than her.
I found
he was
Simon
irritating, but not annoying. Whereas Miriam Mel, I felt, was quite different. But I know what you're saying. I'm actually surprised at how strongly I felt about her. But, that's just me. Perhaps.
I also feel Simon had a more of a progressive arc throughout the trilogy. And I don't feel I saw that quite as much with Miriam L. And you would have thought with the trauma that she endured in the middle that maybe she would grow. And I guess she does a little bit when she realizes she was in love with Simon, I guess. But I don't think she was there are, like you brought up, Carlos, there are petulant, female characters in a lot of traditional fantasy that I've liked. Lloyd Alexander, David Eddings have written a few that are great, but in this case, I don't feel as strongly as you, Kathy, but I don't like Miriam L either. I never became a fan. And at the very end, when her and Simon got together, I was like, you could probably do better, man.
Yeah.
What I like
I'm a little more with Carlos.
Oh, sorry, Nico, go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you, so that was actually a really great segue. I'm a bit more just with you. With I feel like the characters, they are teenagers. She is a spoiled princess, teenage girl. I mean, that's who she is, and so a little bit annoying, but it didn't bother me as much.
The
Well,
one thing
Rogue brought up
like,
Meg Wynn, so we might as well talk about her.
oh,
So overall, I
she's racing.
agree with this, but I did like, I understood at least her entire arc was just for the one scene with Simon at the end.
Yes.
So it didn't forgive everything, but it did kind of at least dampen my thought of, you know, what I didn't like about her character. What I didn't like about her character, I think, was that just every time that Williams took you to her in the entire series, it just pretty much ground the narrative to a halt. And a lot of that was in the second book, where there were just like 9 or 10 different plot threads, and like 9 of the 10 plot threads I thought were incredibly dull, including Megwyn's. But I did like her final arc, and I did like how Simon told Aolar, is that his name? Yeah, Aolar, what had, you know, how she had helped him and everything. So there was kind of a little bit of a redemptive arc there, but yeah, I guess I agree with that.
Nice touch.
Yeah,
it was a nice touch at the end when Simon said that to Aolar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I quite liked her when she first appears.
Same. Yeah.
I think where she goes. Oh, we're in full spoilers. Yeah, cool. So when she discovers the underground door thing to the city, I thought all of that was very, very cool. And what frustrated me most about Stone of Farewell was, please just open the door. Like, we got here. And I went back to check. She finds it on like page 200 and doesn't open the door till like 700 pages into the book. And we follow her sitting at the door, just thinking about it. Open the door. My God. Well, I understand, like, it's not really her. It's just how Tad handles her character. And I think in the last book, she's kind of wasted. She's just sort of
superfluous, I felt.
Yeah, she's just sort of zombified for the whole thing. And it's painfully dull.
Yeah, he could have cut probably 60% of her scenes and still had the same thing at the end. And
yeah,
but yeah. Speaking of Underground,
sorry.
No, I was saying, speaking of Underground, how good are all of the Underground scenes that Tad wrote in all these books? Because that's something that I really enjoyed, even though I did feel that Simon in the final book, it was a bit overlong, all of those scenes, but I still felt that I just love the way that he wrote them.
I thought it was an echo of the first book where he had to crawl his way. So we got to see him now, but as a more mature person going through something similar. There was just, he did such a good job at describing it that you felt like you were trapped with him in the dark.
Yeah.
And there was a real sense of dread, creepiness, like you don't know what's around the corner. It was very similar to the scenes with Guthwolf, because I've got to say, he's a character that really grew on me. Yeah, and I felt a lot of sympathy for his character because he is blind as well. So even if there is light, he couldn't see. But I think you don't realize there are some really great, almost horror scenes that Tad's writing, like with the underground and that uncertainty of what he's going to find, or the Gans, or what was her name? Skoda the witch with Simon. I found even the final scene was very good, had a sense of kind of horror as well to it in the Green Angel Tower, but I really like the underground scenes, but perhaps they could have been a little bit shorter. I put that down to that it's just Tad Williams' style, and you have to accept it pretty much.
I think
those tend to be very hit or miss.
If you're in the mood for it, you can really just sink into it and be whisked away, you know? And I think genuinely there's an aspect to these books where external circumstances need to be right for you to not feel all the bits where he meanders. Like when I read Dragonbone Chair, it was absolutely perfect. I read it a few years ago at Christmas. The tree on, blanket on my legs, cat sitting there. I'm like, take as long as you want, Tad. I don't mind. Just take me wherever you want to take me. You want to explore the castle for 500 pages? Let's do it. And then I found Stone. So I like the tunnel scenes in Dragonbone Chair. And then I brought Stone of Farewell pretty soon after on holiday. And I brought it on the plane, and then I was reading it on the beach. And I'm not sure if the external circumstances were quite right. So when we're underground with Megwin looking at the door, I'm sitting there on the beach just going, open the door, Megwin. Or I'm closing the book. And then I don't know, with the Green Angel Tower, I absolutely flew through the first half, so the first paperback. And with the second paperback with Simon in the Tunnels, I was looking forward to it because I remember liking it from Dragonbone Chair. And oh my God, I liked it at the beginning, and then it just, we are doing the same thing over and over again here. Yeah, we found more food that Rachel the Dragon is leaving out for Guthwolf, and he thinks it's somebody, and it was like, oh. Yeah, I don't need to do that 17 times. But yeah, that's just me.
Yeah, I've seen both reactions. I'm sort of in the middle myself because I think they're really well done scenes, but yeah, they do drag a little bit. That what you said though, Carlos, is funny because I have somewhere a picture of me in December. It's like there's snow everywhere. I'm sitting in front of my fireplace with a fire going, reading to Green Angel Tower, and it was perfect. It was just absolutely perfect. And so yeah, I can definitely get that. I think not to constantly compare to Hob, but it reminds me there's Assassin's Quest, there's a particular plot line where you're very in the character's head and it's kind of jarring, and sometimes people really hate it and sometimes people really like it, and that's kind of feel similar with some of those really in Simon's head moments where it is a little bit much, but kind of just that you do get such like a visceral feeling and kind of a horror feeling, and that's where it's just like, yeah, it really, the effect is so strong, I feel like.
I think Williams and Hobb are definitely two that have a lot of positive similarities, but they also, Hobb herself even says, I read it when in her short story collection, that's the Megan Lindholm and Robin Hobb, because it's two different pen names, same author. And she says sometimes Hobb takes a while to get to the point. Like she says this about herself. And that's exactly Williams. Sometimes he just takes a while to get to the point. Although I think he pressed my patience a little bit, quite a bit more than Hobb ever did in this series. But I think they're also both supremely gifted writers. Just simply stringing the words together is just so rich and just so beautiful at times, but not, like Heidi said earlier, not overly purple or overly dense, but just, just beautiful writing. And I think both of them are easily, some people to compare. And that's why I initially thought, oh, I'm going to love Tad Williams. Robin Hobb is, my favorite fantasy author. So the jury's still out with Tad.
He's very warm and inviting the way you write.
And I think you're right. If you read him at the right time, like we're on a lazy day somewhere, I think it's perfect when it's a meandering book because you are in no rush yourself. Yeah. It's different though if you read him at the wrong time. And of course, it's not going to suit every reader. Some people want a lot of action. This is not the series for that. Not that there isn't action. It's just not frenetic as some books can be.
So did anybody else not see the brilliant subversion of the swords?
Yeah.
Doing what we thought the entire series they were going to do. That, I thought that was brilliant, and especially in the lens of this is in a time where trope subversion was not the norm like it is now.
Yeah.
That's true. It wasn't. Yeah, it was really well done. It was like, oh my God, we've been led to this point and none of us knew. I didn't guess. I'm sure. I don't know if others did, but I certainly didn't guess.
Well, that's where I pulled up to read at some point because I love the Du Thornveerd, the little like poem, the prophecy. That whole
Yeah.
thing is just it's stuck with me. I used it as lyrics in the song I wrote about this series. But when frost doth grow on Clave's bell and shadows walk upon the road, when water blackens in the well, three swords must come again. When Buchan from the earth do creep and Hunan from the heights descend, when nightmare throttles peaceful sleep, three swords must come again. To turn the stride of treading fate, to clear the fogging mist of time. If early shall resist too late, three swords must come again. Just sticks with me. Love that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, that was
I
one
do
that
not-
was one of my favorite moments of the finale, is when you do find out that everything they've been doing is the opposite of what they should have been doing.
Yeah.
I just think, again, when it was written, like, that had to have been, if you had read it at the time, that probably had to have been one of the most like impactful moments for a fantasy reader, period, because people weren't doing things like that at the time.
But even
It's
reading it now, because my expectation reading it now was I'm reading something, a classic traditional fantasy from this time period. It's going to do this thing. I'm okay with it being fairly predictable, and then still pulling the rug out from under us because it worked back then and it kind of still works now.
Yeah.
He did it in the first book when he killed off Morganus so soon.
I saw
It's
that
like-
coming. I saw
Yeah. Did you?
that. It was a typical. It
What
was
a little bit longer.
That's true, yeah. But I just
Simon
thought,
knew nothing. He knew nothing at all. So I thought we need that kind of wise mentor to, give us
Yeah.
some exposition or something.
yeah.
But
No, I think the mentor-mentee relationship, I'm always very immediately skeptical. Someone's going to die here.
Well, hero's journey, they have to die, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And I like
I think it's
he doesn't shy away from that with Simon, which it could be for books that could potentially, be sort of written for a wide audience, including children. He goes there with Simon, especially in the second book, I find, with him dealing with mortality head on. And there's a lot of really cool dialogue in the second book, just to give some positive to the second book.
Yeah.
When some of their I think that's sorry, Kathy, go on.
No, I was just saying, I think every book has something wonderful to say. I know in the third one, Simon, in the midst of battle at the siege, says something about the nobility of war not really existing.
Yes.
After all his fantasizing as a child that war was glorious, he came to the realization that it's anything but. And I absolutely love that passage. I thought it was so beautifully written and profound as well. And I think that's just from one book. There was always in each book something profound that Tad Williams had to say, because he's a smart man and he had a lot of commentary to make about things like war, things like loyalty, things like duty, etc. And I think that's something you don't see all the time in fantasy today.
That's
Maybe
very
not even back then. Certainly, I don't think David Eddings ever really did deal deeply. I love David Eddings, but let's be honest, he is fluff. Yeah. And whereas I can't say that about Tad Williams. Tad Williams definitely has a lot more depth to his writing.
It's funny, Kathy, because that quote that you mentioned about war and lacking nobility, I had read it like 2 days before you posted it on Fireside as a quote, and I was just thinking, man, this was such an amazing quote. And then you caught it just about the same time.
Yeah, there's a few like that.
So Heidi's got a good question. We can answer this one. What did we think about the king not slaying the dragon and finding out that Simon was from royal background?
I
I
didn't
think that's
like that.
another thing where there's such a mix of the things that sort of happen as expected, especially for the time period, and the things that don't. And like Simon ending up actually having royal lineage coming there, like that's super super tropey. But then there are so many other things that aren't. And like I like the twist of like, Prester John totally lied. He didn't really do this. Like I think that's a really interesting thing because he's held up as like the pinnacle of the just king and like the perfect
Mm.
king. And so it's Williams does that a lot with this. There are some of the tropes that are definitely there, but then there are a lot of spins. And so that's where I think one of the reasons it's aged really well in a lot of ways is while some things are predictable or some things feel very predictable now because they've been done so much since, there are still those things that go a different way.
What did we
I
think
like
of the Camarus revelation?
Best
Because that was
character.
one I really liked it, but I feel like he built it up too much.
That's
like
fair.
there's the scene with Strange Art and like he comes out in tears and all of this, and I'm like, man, this must be the worst thing ever. I'm expecting that, like he slaughtered a village of innocents because he thought they were something else, and it just turns out he happens to be, he's Joshua's father and all that. So I'm like, okay, that was good, but I felt he built it up too much. Do you guys agree or disagree with me on that one?
I kind of thought he was the best character of the final book.
I love the character, but the reveal about why he was so troubled and everything, I thought was incredibly overblown.
It's a big thing, but it's a big thing when you think about it that way. He is supposedly the king's son, and all of a sudden we learn he's not. Perhaps that's why he built it up so much. I agree. I thought it was overdone. I kind of also expected a massacre or something else rather than that he fathered a child. But on the other hand, I think he was supposedly the king's son, and now he isn't. So he's not really entitled to rule Ostenard. Not really. And I think that's another reason why Simon did have royal blood, so that he could rule the land. But
it's very much a Tad Williams-ism. That sort of reveal. I was that sort of reveal. That's very much a Tad Williams-ism. That's just he likes that kind of thing. So I'm kind of there. Like it worked for me. I do think it's a little overdone, but that's also sort of just a Tad thing. It's kind of he has a flair for like the ultra dramatic reveal like that. That's something I've noticed he just likes to do.
It's also his first series, so I give him a lot more grace with the first series. I
agree. I'm reading Guy Gavriel Kay's first series right now, Fiona of Our Tapestry, and it's really interesting having read pretty much everything else that he's written. Seeing in the first book, you can see kind of the kernels and the seeds of what's going to become his brilliance as an author. And it doesn't always work because it's early, and you can see, he does the same technique later, and it's like beautiful and it's sublime and it's perfect. And here it's like he didn't quite pull it off here. So yeah, I agree with Tad, especially what we're hearing from everybody about the second series being so much stronger.
Yeah, this is the only book that came out before the Dragonbone show. Tad, this is our cat book, Tail Chasers.
You have the OG cover, is that? The OG cover?
Oh, this is I found this used and I can't believe it because this is original printing. So yeah, but this was his first book, and I talked to him about it. Actually, apparently it like haunted him for a while because he was just known as the cat book guy, and he was trying to start like really publishing. And like the next thing he does is this just massive fantasy series, and so I find that hilarious that that's the two extremes he went to. But yeah, no, I mean that's a really apt description. It's quite good. It's a little bit basic and in different ways, but even with this, like the world building he gives to cat society is surprisingly complex. Like it's good. It's not like a masterpiece by any means, but surprisingly good. But yeah, going from this to all of a sudden now I'm going to write this massive sprawling fantasy epic. I find that so funny.
It's like Peter Jackson getting the keys to the Lord of the Rings franchise based on like the crappy horror films he had made before that. Like,
Yeah.
how does that happen?
Those horror movies are masterpieces. You take that back.
Oh, that's funny, Kevin.
I did not want to know that.
I like Frighteners, actually.
That's cool. I will go watch that, Nico. I did like, before I even read Tad, I did watch when Jimmy had interviewed him on Fantasy Network, and they had a great chat. I really liked him. And sometimes I do see an author, and when I like just kind of the way they talk and the way they are, you realize they're probably going to write really well too. And he was one as well. But yeah, that's a good point.
He's actually done a video on YouTube reading some of the chapters from the Dragonbone Chair. I don't know if people know that.
Oh, yeah.
Ted, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which is really cool.
So let's talk about a couple other characters. One of my favorite characters, I don't know if it's one of yours, was I loved Tiamat.
Yeah.
Anybody else love Tiamat, or was it just me? I really I loved him because he was a character that he had so many doubts, and he didn't think that he was worthy of, the League of the Scroll and everybody else, but he proved to be such a valuable, important component of the entire final book. So I really enjoy characters like that, kind of like not necessarily underdogs, but the ones that see themselves.
Secondary.
Yeah.
Secondary, kind of ignored, like, he's on the periphery rather than in the center of things. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I really like him. I also really like the part of the world that he's from. I could have had a whole book set in that swamp
The
land.
Gans.
Yeah. The weird crab stuff that happened. Insane.
That was more of those like Kathy, you mentioned how Tad could lean into some horror elements.
Yeah.
He was very good at that. Like the diggers, or is that what they were called in the first book? Like, oh my goodness, those were horrifying.
What are they called? I can't remember.
The Buchan.
The Buchan, those guys. Yeah, they came out of the ground, and those
Crazy
things
little monsters. Yeah.
Those were horrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, this scene in particular, so well done.
Yeah,
but
I just want to reiterate, so much lore on all of the different creatures in Last King of Asenard. So much more lore on all of that, which was just I loved that follow-up series so much, and the lore was a huge part of it. There's just really
You're
cool
making me want to pick it up now, and I've got too many things on at the moment.
I'm making myself want to pick it back up. So I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume from the title of one of the books in that series that the Niskis are going to be important.
Yeah, the Navigator's Children.
Yes.
Is that the title? Yeah. As soon as I saw that in the book, I thought,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed them.
A good character. I think because he was not a main character in the series, and yet he played such a significant role, especially in the later books. And he was just, I thought he was a doll. He was darling. I just thought he was adorable, and he did his best. And whenever somebody is so doubtful and yet is still brave like he was the one who actually saved Kamaris from the Norns. Yeah, he was a lovely character. We should also talk about Cadrak at some point.
Cool.
A more divisive character, maybe.
Very complex character.
Like him?
I don't know if I like him. I don't think I like him. I mean, I think he did right at the very end.
He did.
But I also, I don't know.
I think he's very human, very flawed, but also very human. And I think for that reason, I found him very sympathetic, a lot more
Yes.
than Miriam.
That's true.
He has all of the traits and kind of personality aspects of sort of a functioning alcoholic. Just very unreliable.
Yeah.
What's he sort of scheming? But the scheme is just to sink into his hole and find his next drink. Yeah, I found him very sympathetic but frustrating.
Yes.
But he has some great scenes with Miriam L in the last book as well that I think made me also like Miriam L, you know, just the back and forth.
I never liked her.
But I think Kadrock is a bit of he's a more typical character that I am used to. That sort of alcoholic priest. We see that a lot in Irish literature, so I just empathize with him a bit, you know. Yeah,
I did. I liked him. I did. I thought, you know, he's just very flawed, very weak, you know, but that is also people we know. So I thought he was a well-drawn character, actually. And we're talking about characters here, not necessarily, you know, real people, but he seemed like a real person, like somebody you might know. So
yeah,
I thought he was very sympathetic.
I wouldn't say I liked him as as a person, but definitely compelling to read. And I think that's one of the things Tad does a really great job, I think, with the side characters. And that for me too is something I really like, when it's not just your main characters, but you have all of these diverse, and whether, you know, you're talking about Tiamat, who is a side character as well, even though he's, you know, very important in a lot of ways. But yeah, Kadrak as well, and just some of those other characters that they're not the focus, but they really add something, and they add very different perspectives. And so yeah, I think definitely a compelling character.
Yeah, Carlos, you nailed it for me when you said that he's sympathetic but frustrating. And that's exactly how I felt with him, because just when you feel sorry for him and, oh, he's going to go on a good path now, he would just do something that would just drive you crazy. And then you'd stop liking him again, and then he'd build back up, and then he'd fail you once again. And I mean, ultimately he did good at the end. And I think it was a bit of redemption, but yeah, Nico, I agree that in many ways, at least in this series, Tad might have been a little bit better with some of the side characters than the main characters.
I think so.
You know, we're splitting hairs as far as who's a main character, who's a side character. But I'll tell you, the only time I got emotional in this series was the scene at the end with Rachel the Dragon.
Oh, mate, yeah.
That hit me, and that surprised me like you could not believe, because she was such a minor character. I mean, she had a few... I mean, she was memorable at the beginning. She had a big scene with Pyrates in the middle, but like, she was, besides putting out food, she wasn't really doing a whole lot. But her scene, and I guess the bits that we got of her, just made her very real to me. And the relationship that she had with Simon, and it just, yeah, that hit me. That was probably the biggest emotional impact in the entire series for me.
Because she's a mother and she is dedicated to that. Nothing will get in her way.
And Simon acknowledged her. I think that was really good. And that's what made me feel very attached, or not attached, affected, I should say, by the scene, because, you know, he'd always been frustrated with Rachel, always curtailing his activities. But in the end, he realized just what she had done for him. I also think that the scene with Diornorth's death, I found that very affecting. Joshua's reaction specifically to his death, especially as there'd been an earlier scene where Diornorth had said something to the effect of, "No one will remember my name, but I'm still going to fight," something like that. And I thought, oh, that just says everything about the common soldier. And we didn't even get to see him die. We only saw the after effect. And I thought, yeah, that I got emotional there because I really liked Dear North. I didn't want him to
I did
die.
too. He was one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Definitely one of my favorites as well.
Mm,
I will say, in defense of meandering, you don't get this. You don't get all of the memorable side characters that have their own little plots, whether big or small, if you don't meander a bit. And so,
True.
while sometimes it can be tiresome to read, it's one of the things that, like, despite all the crap Wheel of Time gets for the quote unquote slog, like, there's so many memorable little things that you get because of that in the work as a whole. And I feel like Tad does that, but also, like, you wouldn't get the, like, oh, Rachel the Dragon, who, page count wise is basically not even there, but then you still get really great moments, or you get all of these little characters. So you do have to balance it, and it can be too much at points, but it's like, looking at series as a whole, I feel like when you have all of those little moments that also stand out like the big ones, that just tells you there's some real impactful stuff there.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's true. With a longer series, you have that time to explore side characters and make those memorable moments. And I'm a fan of The Wheel of Time. It's one of my all-time favorites. So, yeah, I get what you're saying.
I think more for me, it wasn't meandering off from the main plot or anything like that. It was more, there were many scenes that felt were serving the same purpose with the same characters, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think of an example, but like the one that keeps in my mind is Megwin deciding not to open the door. And I'm like, there were several scenes where, I hate to keep bringing this up, but like, open the damn door. There were just several scenes where he's trying to tell us something about how she's feeling emotionally that he had already told us in a previous chapter, and we're not meeting anybody new, we're not talking to anybody new, we're just thinking about opening the door.
I am absolutely a Megwin hater, so like I cannot disagree. Megwin is the worst thing about the book for me, 100%. I loved this book, but every time we go to Megwin, I'm like, oh, for God's sake! I remember, like, I still loved it, but yeah, Megwin was not for me, and I agree. The scene at the end, I'm like, okay, yeah, fine, this is good, but even then, I'm just like, yeah, I'm glad that I don't have to keep reading about Megwin after this. It's like,
oh, so you felt about her the way I feel about Miriam?
I think so.
Right?
I forget who it was, but someone on the Fireside Discord when we were doing the read along was rereading and mentioned that they understand a little bit better why Megwin's in there, but still didn't like her. So it was one of those, like, even with the hindsight, didn't necessarily appreciate all those Megwin scenes.
I felt even with the way it made sense for the plot at the end, and the way it ultimately affected the story in a meaningful way or an impactful way, I still felt like this didn't need to be this repetitive.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if you needed to have her completely, like, just zoned out for the entire time to do that. But I don't know. I'm not a writer.
Same.
Well, yeah. I think obviously she had a purpose. She found the Dwarrows. She found information about the sword, and she was leader of her dukedom, trying to find a solution for her people. But yeah, she was hard to like. I didn't hate her, but I did get bored with her story. And at the end, I thought, other than this scene with Simon, yeah, I could do without her. One thing I did like about To Green Angel Tower, both books, is there was very little Vorsiva. That's another character I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Are you with me? Are you on this, Carlos? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like her.
Yeah, thank you.
She was, I think her I think I put it in the Discord at one point. I said, I think the sole purpose of Vorsheva's existence is to be difficult. Every single scene she was in, that's all she was. She was difficult no matter what was going on.
She was crying, or she was nagging Joshua.
Yeah, even when we met her people and we understand her a little bit better, it was still like, no, that doesn't redeem her. So what do you think? I mean, with her and then Joshua giving up his potential crown and them sailing off into the sunset, what did you think of that kind of, well, I guess the reveal of him being alive was one part of it too. I mean, what do we all think about that? I kind of liked it, but I kind of would have been okay if he would have been a tragic death as well.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I kind of felt that the reveal that he wasn't actually dead undercut the emotion of the scene when I thought he died.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a, you should have had the balls to go with that.
But was he actually dead, or was it just assumed? I always thought it was assumed he was dead. There was no real evidence that he was dead. So I wasn't upset by that. And I actually liked that he went off into the sunset and gave up the power. Yeah, well, he chose it. So regardless, I think he never wanted the crown. He never wanted to take it away from Elias. He was just looking to save Ostenard and his people. So I think it was perfect that he went off with Vorsiva.
Yeah.
I just think, I didn't mind he's not dead, but, obviously others might have become frustrated with that.
I think that's also a Tadism. He likes the presumed dead character not really being dead. You get that with Kamaris as well. I think that's a particular trope I think he likes to play with. But I'm trying so hard to only memory sour and Thorn thoughts this particular thing. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know, the whole thing with Vorsiva, because she is a very frustrating character, and somebody in the Discord had actually like a really insightful thing that made me feel like maybe I'm a little too hard on her, but also she's so annoying, and I only go that much. But I think it's interesting too, because Joshua is, again, like, he's kind of the archetype of the noble, the perfect prince kind of character, but at the same time, he's with his wife just because she's really hot, and that was his big thing, is like, oh my gosh, he was just stunned by her beauty, and that's pretty much their relationship. And so it's like, even this character can have that kind of shallow fault, even though he's such like a good person overall. He's still, that's kind of where he falls victim to, and there's not really a ton ever given for any reason other than that she's so beautiful that he's there. So it's another kind of, I feel like, interesting complexity to the characters.
That might be Tad Williams though, rather than the actual character, because we have Magwan, who's always described as very ordinary, very plain, who isn't involved with anyone, who doesn't have any of the other characters, even Eole, in love with her, whereas she's in love with him. Then we have Vorsiva, who is described as beautiful and basically pointless as far as I'm concerned. And then Miriamel, who's a spoiled brat, who is also considered beautiful as well. That might be a Tad thing. I don't know.
He does make up for that later.
Okay, good, because I really didn't like how the main females were portrayed in the book. Galoe was great. I loved her.
Yeah.
And I really liked Aditu. I don't know how to pronounce her name. She was cool.
Yeah.
And who else was there? I can't recall if there was anyone else. Was there anyone else? Am I missing something?
I wouldn't say this is necessarily just Tad, but this is also kind of a traditional fantasy trope too. Because at the time, that was often the ways that females were portrayed in fantasy. So
I think those things are, like what you're saying, Josh, very much of the time, but definitely not the worst that I've read of that time.
No,
not at all.
No. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I mean, I find the women frustrating in Eddings as well. I find them frustrating in the wheel of time as well. So you're right, it is, but we don't have to like it. I never liked it then, and I don't like it now. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I did like, I liked just the poignancy of, even though it was very sad at the end, with Isgrimner and his wife mourning their son's death. I thought that was written just beautifully.
He was one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, same. I liked him the entire time. Like every time he was in a scene, just he's kind of like trying to get out of his deathbed to go fight, and in the last book, and the scene, and he also had one of the funniest scenes in the whole series when they shaved his beard at the end of the first book so that he could go in disguise to go find Miriamel. That was hilarious. But I love that character, and it's one of those it was just sad seeing him and his wife just have to deal with that trauma and move forward together. But I thought Williams wrote it beautifully.
That was heartbreaking.
I really like the voice that he gives to some of the side characters, and not all of them are particularly distinctive, but Isgrimner is one, and obviously Benebik is one, has a particular voice. But I find all of the Scythy characters as well, like Jiriki and Aditu, have a certain cadence to their dialogue that I found really like otherworldly. Like these are real fantasy characters, and it's sort of captivating. Like they have an aura or a charisma or something to them, and I thought that was really creative how he did that, how he wrote their voice. But,
and I think that's indicative, Carlos, of his skill as a writer, and honestly how a lot of modern fantasy authors, I think, struggle to measure up to the authors like Tad Williams that do write in a more modern style where, unless they're truly gifted, like an Abercrombie or something like that, where the dialogue all sound the same and the characters all sound the same. But you're right. He definitely had such a unique voice for so many of his characters, and Benebik is the most notable for sure. But you're right that the Scythy did feel just like they were from a different world.
Alien from the beginning. The way they were described, from when Simon found Jiriki up in the tree, I thought, this is not a human. He is not an elf. He looks something completely different. And that was throughout the book. It wasn't, or I should say, he also described their world. Like when Simon went to the Scythy city, that was so unique. I thought, I love this. I really want to know more about their culture and their history. Yes, you're right. He nailed it in giving us that feeling that these are otherworldly creatures. And you're right that a lot of modern writers don't do that, unfortunately. And I think maybe that is something that the more skilled writers can do. They can imbue different characteristics to characters. I'm trying to think of some that do it other than Tad Williams, but regardless, it's the reason I want to read the next series is I definitely have to know more about the Scythy.
That scene with Simon and Stone of Farewell, that was my favorite part of the book. I just love that. I love the scene where he tries to escape and ends up right back where he started, and it did seem so unique and unbelievable and so out of this world. And that was my favorite part. And I did love Aditu as a character. I thought she was a good just a strange creature that just added a lot every time she was in a scene, because she was just so different. Like the scene, another funny one where Simon was trying to seduce that peasant girl or whatever, and Aditu shows up and says, "Stay away from my husband," or something like that. Hilarious.
Was anyone surprised? Well, not surprised. I was going to ask, what did people think of the Scythy going to Neglemont?
It kind
to
the scene where
Is it where they
Where
go
they
to
were-
back up? They go reinforcements, right, to back up the siege.
no, they went to Naglemund to liberate the castle from the Norns, the Scythi and the Hernistiri, Ele and the
Oh,
few
that's
men.
right.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd totally forgotten about that.
Oh, and that's when we thought they were going. Yeah, when we saw Jariki and them traveling, we thought they were going to end up at the siege, and they ended up there. Okay, yeah, yeah, that was a good surprise.
That they went to their rescue.
Yeah,
I thought the way he described them on their horses racing through the forest was really fantastically done. I had this almost ghostly image of them running through on these amazing horses. It was really good. I'm not sure though how I feel about the scene where after they liberated I can't recall the city, Magwin's people from the Rimmersmen, they then decided to go up to Naglemund instead of to help Joshua at the Stone of Farewell. I wasn't sure if I loved that scene. I thought it seemed like a lot, and yet how much did they actually accomplish other than killing everyone in Naglemund? What was the real purpose? They said it was to liberate this castle, but I don't think they actually achieved what they wanted to accomplish, which was to get to the crystal. Is that right? The screen. I can't remember what it's
I wonder if it was just a matter of Williams just subverting our expectations because we saw them on the run and thought they were going to the siege, and they weren't. Maybe that was the entire purpose. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just didn't see a lot of purpose to that.
I think it could just be a case of him trying to put all the pieces in the right place for the last chunk, and then he needed them to do something else that was
Gonna take some time.
yeah, like they're on the journey, they need to stop off and do something exciting.
It's possible. It seemed like an unnecessarily long sidetrack before they went down to Hayholt met up with Joshua's forces. Yes, I know they had beef with the Thorns, but I just wasn't sure what was the purpose of liberating this castle.
Didn't they say, I'm remembering now, they said like they had past relationships with the Hernistiri, and they were there to settle a debt or something or something like that.
They went to Hernistiri because they had always felt a debt to them because they were the only humans who stood with them during the past battles. But after they liberated the Hernistiri from the Rimmersmen,
then they went
off to Naglemund, and I thought, I can understand Hernistiri, why Naglemund?
Yes.
That's the part I'm just not sure.
I don't even remember that. I remember them going to the Hernistiri.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I think
went up with some of them.
my brain categorized it as another tad sidetrack.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's how it felt to me.
Yeah. So what do we think of Prirotes?
He was black as black. He had no redeeming qualities, did he?
If he had a mustache, he would twirl it.
Right?
Yeah. I like my villains a little bit more grey sometimes, but he was just, there was nothing except it was a blackguard.
But I also felt, though, when we got to the end and it was kind of revealed what exactly, his whole goal was, I just thought, did you really think this was going to work? Did you really think you were strong enough and you were going to outwit the Storm King? And the whole thing, it was like, you did all of this? and
For
obviously
ambition.
this was doomed to fail from the start. How could you think this was going to?
I don't know if you guys have read Faithful and the Fallen, but I feel there's one character in Faithful and the Fallen. If anyone in the chat can remind me of the name, I can't. Oh, no, can't remember the name. But there's a very similar character in Faithful and the Fallen. Reminded me a lot. I think it was probably influenced by Parades, and just a really hateable wizard person. That's scheming, and honestly not a very interesting character, is just there to be the hateable schemer. It's not somebody in the chat will know if they've read Faithful and the Fallen. Whoever that is, let me know.
I also can't think of the name, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think he's sort of like in here, he's sort of like the Saruman character. Would be the comparison, but like a little bit more involved, where he thinks very highly of himself and that he's gonna figure this all out. And
he was arrogant, Proratus, but he was also a torturer. He was also a killer. I mean, weren't there body parts and things in his chambers that Simon found? I mean, it sounded like a torture chamber to me. But because of his arrogance, I think it was not unexpected that he tried to take over from the Storm King.
I guess so, because he was very powerful. I mean, he got stabbed in the back and nothing happened. And so I guess I can understand that. But yeah, it was one of those, like I was mildly disappointed. Although I will admit I was, I think I posted in the Discord, I said, I didn't have Miriamel killing Pyrates on my bingo card. And then the next chapter was like, oh, okay, yeah, she didn't. So that was kind of cool, I guess. But yeah, that part, I guess, was a little disappointing, maybe.
I thought it was predictable from the very beginning that he was going to try to take power. But what I really liked was that the Storm King tried to take over Simon, and Simon just said no.
Yeah.
And that was enough to stop him. I thought that was fantastic. I really liked that scene, actually. No?
The ultimate confrontation was great. I don't know if he was. Yeah, he was.
He was.
Initially.
He was. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he betrayed them all.
And then Kadrak was his lackey for a little bit, but
yeah.
I think that's also
who we missed.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's also what set Kadrak down his path, was realizing that, I think it was his own soul was tortured, and he himself didn't think that he could be redeemed, because he helped this mustache twirly person. But yeah, who have we missed of the big?
What about?
Oh wait, here we go. Niski.
Oh yeah.
We like
need more of them.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why I was, like Kathy said, I was excited when I saw they were Navigator's Children, and then the book is called that. So we'll definitely, whenever we get to Last King of Ostenard, I guess we'll be seeing a little bit more of them. Hopefully more 50 as well.
Between the two series, I think it's also important, at least I've had friends say, especially Jimmy, say that you should read The Heart of What Was Lost between the series. Would Nico agree?
Story, novella?
Are there two novellas, Nico, I think?
Yes. So The Heart of What Was Lost is the first one. This is between To Green Angel Tower and the Witchwood Crown. It's kind of cleaning up loose ends, letting you know what happened. So while this honestly is my least favorite out of the whole series, despite the fact that Scribner is in it a lot, I just I don't know, for some reason this one didn't do it for me. It is important to read.
It's also
Brothers of the Wind. It's what? Sorry.
So,
It's also only 200 pages.
Yeah, it's
ah,
pretty short. So
well,
it's not like it's a big. This is short too. Brothers of the Wind is a long it's a prequel from way before, that gives you some really important insight. I recommend reading them in the order they were published, because this before Into the Narrow Dark is going to give you. You don't have to read it, but it's going to give you a lot more context on some stuff that's happening. And so yeah, it's really really good to read both, I would say.
Cool.
So those are
Are
both
you-
novellas?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good.
Josh, are you thinking of doing a read along of the subsequent series?
Not anytime soon. I'll be honest. Stone of Farewell kind of broke me and made my interest in epic fantasy at kind of an all-time low right now. Even though I enjoyed To Green Angel Tower, the idea of picking up an epic fantasy series right now has like zero interest to me. So until I'm still reading Malazan, until I finish that series, which I'm reading at the pace of like 3 a year, I don't see me starting any big series. So maybe 2027, because I'm only 4 books into Malazan. But
I'm a little bit like you, Josh, and I think it's just because I read a lot of other things as well, that if I pick up an epic fantasy series, I'm not necessarily one to always binge either. And I'm happy to sit with a big series like that. But I think had I actually broken up To Green Angel Tower, I may not have gotten so burnt out with it. So yeah, I'm there with you. I'm excited to read Last King of Ostenard and those novellas, but I want to let the anticipation build up. I wouldn't just go straight into it.
same.
I think that is honestly probably good, because there are a lot of similarities in the series. There are a lot of things that Tad Williams does that you'll be like, oh, this is kind of like something he did in the first book. But there's a lot of good too. But also, like, if you have that sort of like nostalgic feel that like, oh, I'm getting back to these, like, you're gonna enjoy it a lot more if you're coming into it from there. So I think, yeah, giving it a little bit of break, letting it build, is good. I did end up binging them because I ended up getting an e-arc of The Navigator's Children, and so forced myself to binge. I had a good time, but that's probably not going to be the best way to do it for most people. I would agree. I think having some gap, taking your time is probably good, but yeah, really, really enjoyable.
I have no idea when, but I'm definitely going to read it. At the moment, though, I'm finishing off Malazan. I've still got 2 books.
So there's 3 of us in the same boat, because I'm a good chunk into Bone Hunters right now, and that's the only fantasy I'm going to be reading for a while.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually reading others as well at the same time, but Malazan and Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn was probably a little bit too much, so I almost felt burnt out as well. So if I do read any other fantasy, it's shorter, smaller, kind of not as grand a scale.
And
But
that's my plan.
close.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's my plan. I have some Guy Gavriel K standalones. Fiona Var, all the books are like 300 pages. Easy. Dresden,
I'm always
it's urban
doing some big
fantasy,
fantasy.
Yeah.
So yeah, no
Sometimes
big
you just
crackers.
need a break. Sometimes you just need a break. Or I don't like having 2 big series with thick chonkers. I prefer to have maybe 1 and then smaller series in between. Yeah.
So
But
I'm curious about the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn books, and we can split the last one in 2 if we want, because I have very differing opinions about the 2 halves of it. But how would you guys rank all of the 4 books?
Oh, I hate ranking. I changed my mind. Tomorrow I'll have a completely different ranking, but I'll try. Somebody else can go. Well, I think about it.
Spur of the moment, I'll go 3-1-2.
Yeah, I think of them as 3 books as well, and I would say the same thing. 3-1-2.
So
I think of them as 4.
If I think of them as 4, I would say 1, 3, 4, 2. Yeah.
It's a toss-up. I really liked 3, but I hated the end.
3, yeah.
Mary Mel did. Unfortunately, that took away a lot of my enjoyment of that book because I was so mad.
Miriam L.
So otherwise it would be, it's between a toss-up between 3 and 1. 4 and 2 is last, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all agree that Stone.
Yeah. We all struggled with that on the fireside too, didn't we? We were really struggling to get through it. Yeah. Not that there weren't
we lost some people too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't really have issues with it. The first one, just there's something about like the first like couple hundred pages, just Simon just Simoning at the castle, and like I don't know, I loved it. It's just one of those things where I started reading it, I clicked with the prose immediately. I didn't care that nothing was happening. And we did a buddy read years ago when I was first reading it too, and there were some people who immediately dropped because they're like, I can't read another 100 pages of Simon just doing nothing in the hay-hole. I'm like, I get it, but I loved it. So I feel like it was a little bit successive for me, but I loved Dragonbone Share so much, and then to Green Angel Tower just as a whole, all of the great things that's where there. So 2, it's not that I didn't like it. I didn't really have the experience you guys did, thankfully. 1 and 3 stand out to me a lot more.
I think Matt said on the last one of the last 2, he said Simon is probably the least competent fantasy protagonist he ever read. And it was kind of true.
Pretty accurate.
It was, because I was frustrated with him in the second book because I was expecting more of a character arc. So it was nice to see it finally get there in the third book.
I'm curious to see how he writes him in the sequel books. Does he get any smarter?
Yeah, because like Fitz is still dumb in Realm of the Elderlings when he's older, but we love him, and I'll fight anybody that says he's a bad character.
I can non-spoiler kind of answer that if you want.
Go for it,
but it's up to you. So I think Tad Williams does a fantastic job balancing having the characters still be the same core people, although with time having passed. So you're going to see Simon. He has matured, but he's still Simon. Deep down, he's still the same character. So I think he balances really well with having like doing something that, like he might have done before. He's still kind of that dumb kid in some ways, but he's grown. And so I think it makes the characters very nostalgic in a way, but it's also really great to see them, how they've changed too. And they have changed in ways that make sense. So that's what I would say.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Well, even towards the end of the last book, Simon, when he was confronted by Isgrimna and others who wanted him to take the crown, he displayed a maturity we haven't seen up to then, because he'd been through so much anyway. So I'm curious to see what he's like, but I need a break from Miriam Mel, so it may take me a little while first, before I start it.
Yeah, no, I agree with Simon. Looking back, although I was frustrated, I look back with a lot of fondness with the character from where he started and what he went through and ultimately what he became at the end. So I definitely look forward to in maybe 2027 getting back to reading Simon again. So let's wrap up with maybe just making a recommendation. Who's the target audience for Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn? Because I think that's always good, because a lot of people always want to know who should read this.
I did make a rather long why you should read video about this, where I try to kind of answer that question. So I'll do my quick version. But I think if you're a classic style fantasy fan, especially if you like nice prose. So if those are things that you like, this is probably like a must read. Even if you're you have some issues, like, because this has been a pretty mixed group. Everybody seems to, for the most part, have enjoyed it at the end, but pretty mixed. But I think those are things to be aware of, knowing that it's long, knowing that it's kind of meandering. Like, if that's your thing, if you like the world building and a lot of this classic fantasy feeling, this is something to check out. If you are primarily a modern fantasy reader, stay away. If you don't like the classic style stuff, you're not going to enjoy this, and that's fine. There's a lot of my favorites people hate if they're like really big and they like the modern style more. This is like, it's one of those influential series. You'll see echoes, but it's definitely more for the classic fantasy kind of fan, I would say.
I would say as well, if you are an appreciator of, if perhaps to go a level deeper, even just like you like reading fantasy casually for entertainment, for the fact that you just enjoy fantasy, if you're also an appreciator of literature and the sort of chronology of it, or the sort of lineage of it, it's important. It's an important series to read if you want to, if you have an appreciation for influences. So I would say, if you're that kind of reader, that literature students, that kind of thing, it's a good series to read to grow an appreciation of where maybe some modern tropes came from, or perhaps where modernized it, where Tolkien, where there was a bridge from Tolkien to the sort of darker stuff later, or the more sophisticated political stuff later. It's kind of a good bridge. So if you have an appreciation for going back and seeing that lineage in terms of writers influencing other writers, also. Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
I would also add to everything you guys have said that if you also enjoy seeing character development over time, such as Simon, Joshua, etc., then a longer series is usually better for that, because you have a lot more time to see that growth in the characters. If you're looking for action, this isn't the series for you. Not that there isn't action in it. There is some great scenes, some great fighting scenes, etc. It's more that that's only a small part of the story, whereas other stories are simply just action, just action packed. This isn't a series for that. And I think modern readers, modern fantasy readers, may be used to something different, but there's a lot to be said for trying new things to them. This may be an older series, but it is beautifully written. The prose is truly beautiful. Tad Williams is a fantastic writer. There aren't that many great writers in fantasy, I'm sorry to say. I mean, there are some good ones, but not great ones. And there is a reason he is so influential. It's because he writes so well. And his story may not seem original today, but it's worth reading just to find out where some of the other authors have gotten their inspiration, like A Song of Ice and Fire, for example.
I would also add as well, so there's a modern thing of wanting cozy fantasy, and there's a thing that people categorize as that. To me, this is the coziest fantasy. This is cozy fantasy. If you want something cozy and to be whisked away on an adventure with a stupid little boy, this is the series for you.
There are lots of parts like that, for sure. That's a fun thing to bring up, I think.
Yeah, I would just say for me, like 3 quick points. 1, read it if you just love authors that can just flat out write.
Yeah.
You can just flat out write. Number 2, if you're like me and you truly value world building and fantasy, which is something that I enjoy so much, history and lore in a world, For me, that's the thing I love most about it. And the third thing is, if you can't be a reader that wants wall-to-wall action, you have to be okay with a slower pace. If those three things apply to you, for sure. And I do want to add, because I think the Rogue has a great point here, something I really enjoyed in this series was knowing that it was influential and seeing some of the modern series that I've read already and knowing, oh, here's where Martin got that idea. Here's where Durfee got that idea. You know, that kind of thing. Really, I really enjoyed that aspect of reading it as well. But I just want to thank my guests, Kathy and Carlos and Nico, for joining us today. I want to thank everybody in the chat for hanging out and adding a lot to this discussion. And if you're watching this afterwards, you know, drop us a comment and let us know what you thought about memory. And I just noticed I wrote, I'm going to say it was autocorrect, but the title says Memory, Sorry, and Thorn. So I'm going to have to go to my YouTube page and update that. So I hope you didn't read Memory, Sorry, and Thorn. But if you enjoyed Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and you enjoyed the chat, let us know. Everybody have a great Sunday, and we will see you some other time. Take care.
Thanks for
Bye,
having me.
everyone. Yeah, thanks for having us, Josh. All right, I think he's gone, so we should also go. Bye, Carlos.
See you.